in a world full of negative people. Hey man, I'm just trying to be a positive guy, a positive farmer, a positive outfitter. This is a Shark Farmer podcast with your host, Rob Sharkey. Whatever.
And welcome again to Shark Farmer Podcast. Hey, I'm your host, Rob Sharkey, and today we're going to go out to Kansas. We're going to talk to Tera Barnhardt. How you doing, Tera?
I'm doing really well. How about yourself?
I couldn't be any better. What's going on in the great state of Kansas today?
Well, the sun is shining and the wind isn't blowing, which is kind of an oddity in southwest Kansas. We can get some pretty hard winds out here, but it's a pretty beautiful day for the beginning of May.
Yeah, Kansas, I've driven across it several times, and let's see, there's a city in the middle of it, and that's about it.
A lot of people forget how Kansas is very rectangular, so saying that you drove across it probably took you quite a bit to get all the way across. I'm in southwest Kansas, so I'm about 9 miles from Colorado and 30 miles from Oklahoma, so you can't get much further down in the corner than where we are, and it's very rural. The nearest city is probably 4.5 hours away.
Gotcha. Well, see, southwest of Kansas, that's Florida, right? No.
That geography is hard. Geography is hard for some people. I totally understand.
Okay, Tera, I need to do my ad, all right? You ready?
Yes.
Tera, tell me, like, if you were wanting, agriculture news, news about, like, say, markets, weather, machinery, crops, technology, farm management, livestock, or, family stuff, where would you go?
Shark Farmer Radio?
Tera, you are a wonderful human being. You happen to be wrong in this one, and that's okay.
Man.
That's fine. That was a really good guess.
I'm hardly ever wrong, Rob.
Okay. All right. Well, you would go to, of course, agriculture.com. That is the website for a successful farmer. You've heard of them, right? They've been around for like a billion years.
Yep.
Yeah, I don't think it's a billion. I don't think I can say that because then, like, the ad's misleading. 100 years, all right? You go there, and you can find all this good stuff. You know what's really cool, though, that you can find there, like, really, really, really cool?
What's that?
My YouTube segments that I do with Successful Farming. It's called Shark Farmer TV, not to be confused with the television show that's called Shark Farmer TV. So far, they haven't fought yet. The two, I don't know, because we kind of did them both. We called them the same names. You never know what's going to pop up people are going to be mad at. In fact, you know what, Tera? Do you know what happened this weekend? Do you have any idea?
This weekend, no. People were preparing for Cinco de Mayo.
No. Here's what happened. See, I started getting messages like Friday from very, very, very upset people because Hee Haw was not going to be on RFD TV on Sunday night.
Oh, man.
Hee Haw went off the damn air 30 years ago, Tera. 30 years ago.
See, I've never even seen Hee Haw because I don't think it was on the air when I was born.
I don't know why. It wasn't even my fault. My show is on Tuesday nights, but I guess I'm the new show. And when the new show comes on, you would think they would be ticked off at Carol damn Burnett because instead of Hee Haw showing, they're showing old reruns of Carol Burnett. You think, Tera, you would frickin' think that these people would be like, oh, Carol Burnett and oh, Red Skeleton. But no. Hee Haw is the end all be all to these people. And the rage and the cussing. And these are like seasoned people, like 80, 90-year-olds. They were giving me the business like you couldn't even imagine.
Oh, man, that's rough.
Yeah. You know your sister, Julie? You ever heard of her?
Yeah, I haven't seen her in a while with all this stuff that's going on. Every region says it differently. There's a lot of people that are very much more professional, but around here we're like, with all the shit that's going on around here.
Okay, this is good. You segued into the family thing. Your sister can cuss somebody out worse than anybody I've ever seen, like up one side and down the other, and make them feel 2 inches tall. I know this. I've been on the recipient end of it. Julie doesn't hold a candle to these people that were cussing me out because Hee Haw was canceled and they blamed Shark Farmer TV for it.
That's awesome.
Damn it, Tara. Now you got me all confused. The ad is about successful farming, the website. Go to it, agriculture.com.
You detracted quite a bit from, I was the original subject.
You got me talking about Julie and stuff. Now, yes, this is not the way this podcast is going to go. We're going to focus like a laser on stuff. Don't get me talking about Hee Haw. Agriculture.com, successful farming, Shark Farmer TV segments, and the Shark Farmer blog on there. Yes, be there or be square. All right, Tera Barnhardt. Okay, yes. Now I'm all, gosh, I wish I had a drink. All right.
Flustered.
So for the people at home, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I am a veterinarian by trade. I went to my undergraduate school was Kansas State University there in Manhattan, Kansas. So I'm a second-generation wildcat, and I don't know if you can turn your blog purple for the day, but you should probably consider doing that.
I thought Kansas was the Cyclones.
Dude, wrong state. That's definitely Iowa.
Oh, the state that's directly north of you. Okay, I'm sorry.
Oh, man. It's close. It's close. The geography was tough. And where did you go to school?
I went to Southern Illinois University, and when I was going, they were ranked the #1 party school in the nation.
I can see that. Geography not high on the list, but partying way up there.
Again, we're focusing here, Tera. So you went to Kansas. Did you know when you went there, when you were little Tera, and you just said, hey, I'm going to go to college, did you know you were going to be a vet?
I knew at a pretty young age that I wanted to be a veterinarian. I grew up on a family farm and ranch. We had quite a few cattle, and then we also raised row crops, mostly irrigated where we're from. The vet that we worked with our cattle came out quite a bit and worked really closely with me, and I just got infatuated at a really young age with the ability that he had to solve problems. He's passionate about animals, and he was passionate about working with people. And I thought that fit really well with what I'm good at. But it's not all about working with animals all day, every day when you're a veterinarian. There's a lot of parts of my job that are pretty interesting because it's more problem solving for the people that I'm serving in my role. So it's a challenging career. But yes, I knew when I was young that I wanted to do that. And Kansas State University has a phenomenal veterinary school. And so I found my direction really close to home and didn't even have to leave Kansas to get my goals accomplished.
Was a veterinarian when you were a kid, was he handsome?
He was. See? I hope he doesn't listen to this, but yeah, we called him Smoking Hot Dr. Stone.
I wonder how many people, Dr. Smoking Hot, how many, especially young women, he convinced to go into veterinarian school.
That might be the reason. Veterinary school is largely female now. It's like 80% of graduating veterinarians are females, and he might be the reason, the sole reason.
Yeah, I happen to know, like in every other school in the nation, it's like 99% men. So I think it's totally Dr. Smoking Hot.
He did it.
Okay, when he came out, right? And when you call a vet, you generally, something's wrong, and, either he's going to fix something or he has to post something. So he's doing stuff that isn't, I don't know, the flowers and bumblebees, right? I mean, were you drawn to, like, some of the stuff, like the posting of the animals? Did you find that interesting?
Oh, absolutely. The particular case that really opened me up to thinking that I wanted to be a veterinarian involved a lot of necropsies. We had a new group of heifers that we had brought into our farm, and they were next to several groups of feeder calves, and so we ended up with a BVD abortion storm, basically caused by bovine viral diarrhea, and that virus caused our heifers to then abort their calves, and we ended up doing a lot of necropsies on those calves to solve the problem and figure out where we had gone wrong. And we had been under the assumption that the heifers were vaccinated properly, and through those necropsies, Dr. Stone definitely figured out for our operation, and we changed how we vaccinated and made it to where we could prevent problems like that in the future. But I was all about it, gloved up right next to him. He taught me how to take samples and taught me a lot about anatomy at that point because of the different samples that you do need to take to diagnose different diseases in cattle. And I still like doing a good necropsy. I prefer not to do them when it's 107 degrees out, but other than that, I'm game to cut open a dead animal and solve a problem for someone. So.
Oh, you know what, Tara? Do you know what? Tonight on RFD TV, do you know who my Skype guest is?
No, who is it?
Cody Krillman. You ever heard of that guy?
Oh, yes. He's way further north than you are.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's Nebraska he lives in.
I think he's even further north than Nebraska, but yes, I do know Cody Krillman. So is he going to do a live demonstration of a necropsy?
You know, it's funny. We're just doing a Skype interview, and this was done way back in December, and I think he was even in the airport when we did it. But I was giving the guys at the RFD, right, these guys in the control booth, I was giving them the YouTube and that. And they're like, we can't show that because he's cutting up stuff. I'm like, well, yeah, that's what they do. That was the whole thing. He was like showing this stuff before it was kind of mainstream. And they're like, I don't know. So honestly, I don't know what tonight's episode is going to look like. But hey, why wouldn't you turn into that, right?
Right. I have 2 little kids, and there's a lot of times where my career requires me to load them up in my vet truck and take them along with me because there's just not a lot of flexibility when I need to go out to a client's place and perform a necropsy. And my little boy got to watch me do one day, and he ended up telling my dad that cows have bumpy kidneys. And he asked my dad, he said, Papa, do you have bumpy kidneys? And my dad looked at me and thought, what a weird question for a 3-year-old to ask, but I don't know. And I said, no, you have smooth kidneys. And my little 3-year-old goes, yeah, Papa, because cows have multilobulated kidneys, and walked off. And I thought, man, my work here is done. He might fail kindergarten, but
that's child abuse in some countries.
No, he's going to be pretty well versed on the anatomy of a cow, that's for sure.
Okay, so you go to school, you become a vet. All right, so take me through the whole timeline of you graduating, getting married, having kids, and what you're doing as a practice.
Well, I got married during veterinary school. My husband Sheldon and I own a residential construction company. So when I was finishing veterinary school, we were starting this construction company, trying to finish veterinary school, building houses in Manhattan to just spec homes to put on the market. And so if you can imagine, like, the recipe for a really successful marriage, that was it. You know, there's a lot of times we thought, holy cow, what have we gotten ourselves into? But I graduated in 2014 and moved out to Southwest Kansas. Both of us grew up in farming families from Southwest Kansas. And I wanted to get into mixed animal practice because I was afraid if I didn't give that a shot, I would always regret not having gone to a traditional clinical practice situation. Knowing that my interest and passion is in bovine medicine, so only working with cows, I gave it a shot for a couple of years working in a mixed animal practice. Super challenging. I learned a lot. I would never regret those couple of years in the traditional clinical practice. It just wasn't my cup of tea. I definitely wanted to get back to more bovine-specific practice, and so I took a job at that.
Whoa. I want to know what's so different about it, because when you say that, in my mind it pops in, you probably had some crazy cat lady that you wanted to smack on a daily basis compared to going to the farm with cows.
It is really difficult for me to go back and forth, right? You're working on big production systems. You're going to a feed yard. You're going to a ranch with a lot of cows, and then you might have somebody call in and be like, there's a bump on my cat's head, and I don't know, it could be cancer, and you're like, okay, well, probably not. It also could be a bug bite. Like, let's not freak out about this. So I don't have
No,
a
no,
tough
no,
time
no,
going back and
no,
forth.
no,
That's
no.
absolutely
Be
accurate.
honest. Be honest, because I'm assuming every one of those calls you just said, well, I would put them down and then hung up.
No, no, no.
Really?
You can't have people freaking out on the other line.
They're cat
They
people.
would
They're
definitely
fine.
show up. They would show up on your front door, though.
They are
That's
that
what you got to
crazy.
handle with care. You got to
Yeah.
handle with care.
Yeah, that's the type of put people in the pits in the basement, make them rub lotion on the skin and stuff like that. You know what I'm saying? That guy
could
did
get
have a
really
dog.
dicey.
You remember that movie? He had a dog, and that was the whole thing. She got a hold of the dog. It's all making sense now. So I understand what you were doing in your mixed practice, but your love was bovine.
Definitely. Wanted to get back to cattle. I took a job with a corporate feedlot. So they owned 4 finishing yards. So the feedlots that we would take the cattle from about 600 pounds to all the way to slaughter. And
Okay.
then they also owned a day-old dairy calf ranch. And so we would take day-old calves from the dairies, and they would be the male calves, and we would bottle raise them until we could wean them, and then we would transition them. The calf ranch was like a really good example of preschool, kindergarten, elementary school. We'd get the calves, through all of those stages of life, and then they'd be about 400 pounds, and we would then transition them to one of the finishing lots. That job was super challenging, and there was a lot of cattle. There's about 250,000 head at one time.
Wow.
Under my care as a veterinarian. We did a lot of training on animal welfare, training on antibiotic stewardship. You think about those production systems are huge, and so managing the employees became the job of the veterinarian so that we could make sure that our protocols were being carried out correctly and that everything was being treated the way the company had a standard for, the way I had a standard for, and
Okay.
it was
Whoa,
just a really,
you're throwing
really
too much stuff
great
at me. No, we can't. You're skipping over stuff. Damn it. First of all,
Sorry.
250,000. Is that what you said?
Yes, 250,000 head of cattle
Okay.
in one county.
I know. That's insane. So you're the vet, right? Because automatically, the people that don't understand all this are going to say there's no way that you can keep those healthy and happy or whatever. So for people out there that don't understand it, can you please spend a few moments saying how you do that?
Oh, well, I refer to them as animal caretakers. You're absolutely correct. There's no way the veterinarian can take care of all of those animals, but I design protocols for, when you're seeing respiratory disease in cattle, this is how I want it treated. And these are the symptoms of respiratory disease, and this is what I would expect if you're going to make that diagnosis. So I'd almost train our animal caretakers to the point of being a nurse or a nurse practitioner. They're not licensed, they're not trained from a school perspective, but definitely very skilled labor, people that are watching the animals every day and making the diagnoses based on the protocol that we've given them. The other thing is people that may not understand a large feed yard, you hear 250,000 head and you think, oh my gosh, you've got to keep them all healthy at all times. How do you even have time to sleep? Well, there are cattle in that production system that just arrived at the feed yard, and those are our main concern, right? They're the ones that are most susceptible to different diseases. And then there's cattle that have been there for 30 or 40 days. There's cattle that have been there 60 to 90 days. And at that point, they're just in maintenance mode. Very few of them get sick. Very few of them have problems. And so once you kind of break it down more into what you need to focus on, it's not 250,000 head of cattle all of a sudden. It's I'm paying attention to, 1,000 head at this feed yard that are newly on feed, and we've got to really watch them. And then once they're further along in the feeding period or even close to going to slaughter, there's not very many issues that arise at that point in the production systems. You got to break it down to what populations are at risk. And it's kind of like when kids go back to school in the fall. For a while, their germs are all mixing up and everyone's getting a cold or getting respiratory issues. And then as the school year goes on, they kind of get used to each other's germs and do okay. So.
Oh, so that was the correlation between like the preschool and the kindergarten you were talking about.
Yes, those baby calves would be born on a dairy, and then they would be taken to the calf ranch, and each calf would be held in an individual hutch so that we can manage their health very closely. And they would be fed bottles, grain, water, all from day one. They're given their bottles of milk every day, multiple times a day. So we keep them in that individual area so that we can really intensively manage them and watch them. And then as they grow, we introduce them into group housing where they live with some other calves for a little bit, and we eventually get those groups bigger and bigger until they're allowed to go to a pen and go into the feed yard.
Okay, good. Well, I didn't know what you were going at. I thought you may be suggesting that you castrate all the boys in preschool. I thought, man, these Kansas chicks are tough.
Now, that might solve some other problems in society, but I won't go there because, remember, I'm a veterinarian. Not going to speak on the human side of things.
Yeah, but you know how to do it. When your kids get old enough to date, I'm sure you will reiterate that.
Absolutely.
You're a millennial, right?
I am. I think that our generation gets dogged on a lot for being a millennial.
And
but,
rightfully so.
I think there's rightfully so.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Not all of us are bad. There's probably good and bad in every generation, don't you think?
I don't know. Well, it is what we'll move on. All right. You're proud of your generation. That's fine. All right.
I relate to consumers. That's the main reason. I'm proud of being a millennial because right now there's a lot of consumers of agriculture products in that age range. And me being a veterinarian and a mom and in that age range, I feel like I can relate to them and we can start making changes in our industry that make sense, but also keeps the consumer in mind. Because at the end of the day, if we don't have consumers for our products, we're just really not in a very profitable business.
So do you do that? Do you talk to consumers in any way? Are you ever in a position where they look at you and say, oh, Tera's a vet, she can tell us this stuff?
I don't see that as much where I live. I'm fortunate enough to live in such a rural community that ag is just a part of the thread of the fabric of my community. Yeah, so all the consumers understand where their food comes from because it's right in front of their eyes. I do take it seriously as my role as a veterinarian to advocate to consumers and people who maybe don't have that opportunity to see where their food comes from and see how it's prepared and produced. I take that role seriously. A lot of that occurs through social media. A lot of that occurs from my veterinary classmates. You'd be shocked how many students I went to veterinary school with. They had no idea how animals got from the farm to the fork. It was a pretty foreign concept, and we went through the same education. And so those opportunities to reach out to people that I've maybe had a connection with in the past, I definitely take those seriously and am happy to do it. I'm happy to answer questions for people. You can blast my email address out because if people have a question about how their food's produced and they would trust a veterinarian to answer that question, give me a holler. I'm happy to do so because there's a lot of labels and misinformation and politicians and actors out there who have a lot of opinions about how our food's produced, and they maybe don't understand the real process. I would encourage people to get their information from the source. And then if you're not happy with it, we can point you in the direction of somebody who maybe has an answer you'd agree with.
Yeah. You mentioned like how the food gets to the plate and all that, right? You're in a unique situation where you get to observe a lot of things that are happening that are piquing interest in everybody. We've got COVID. We've got plants shutting down. We've got big feedlots. What's your opinion on these plants? Because you're out there in the middle of it. There's two things. You cannot backlog that supply chain of beef. And then you've got the side that says, well, you cannot put those workers in danger. What is your opinion?
Absolutely. I think unprecedented is the buzzword right now, right? We're in unprecedented times. I don't think agriculture has seen this sort of challenge before to this extent.
Yeah, it's
And
weird. We're living history. Now, see, you're too young. You don't even remember 9/11. To me, this even goes past it because it's so prolonged. But you're absolutely right.
when it touches so many parts of our country, it literally is touching everyone. Where 9/11, we all had a deep and profound respect for it, but it didn't really shake very many of us. I was in seventh grade, and that seems like a lifetime ago. 9/11 just didn't shake our food supply. And I'm going to talk about people getting nervous. It's when our food supply gets a little bit of an attack, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is kind of an attack on it. I've said multiple times to different people that our food supply is so robust. It's so robust and yet so very delicate. And that's a weird dichotomy to have right now. And that's what we're going to try to work with and move forward with.
Yeah, but you're out there in the country where a lot of us aren't. So, I mean, you have a unique knowledge about whether these packing plants, in your opinion, should remain open or shut down.
I think human safety obviously is on the forefront of everyone's mind. We've got to strike a balance. In the skilled labor in our packing plants right now, I believe we have a very low risk population other than their work environment. They're young, they're healthy, they're very skilled. You can't go to a packing plant and be somebody who's weak or not healthy, and so we have that working for us. Nature has demonstrated that over and over that subset of population will handle a disease like COVID better. I feel for the management and the ownership of these packing plants, but we have to strike a balance and keep some sort of movement in the supply chain, because as our brothers in the pork industry and in the poultry industry have seen, there's a lot of challenges when you start backlogging it. And luckily in the beef industry and the dairy industry, those are the two industries I work mostly in, we have some flexibility, mainly because for the majority of a beef animal's life, they are on pasture and they're at the ranch that they were born on. And so we do have some flexibility to move things around, but we do have a lot of efficiencies in our system as well. And so that is what's presenting the challenges right now. Our beef cattle can be slowed down a little bit better than, say, what the hogs and poultry industries are faced with. Our beef cattle can be slowed down as far as being put on a maintenance diet, reducing the amount of input to try to keep costs as reasonable as possible, but yet maintain those animals in a very healthy manner. Other thing we have is most of our animals are outdoors, and they are in pens that are built on a square footage based on, how much feed bunk they have available. So even if they put on 50 or 100 extra pounds, there's going to be room for them at the feed bunk. So we don't run into some of those challenges that are just based on infrastructure of how our feed yards are built. And we're very fortunate in that aspect. Projections as far as what we're looking at with the packing plants is if we can stay at a level kind of that they're at right now, we're going to come out of this scarred, but we're going to be okay as long as we keep pushing forward and getting cattle down the line and into people's grocery stores.
Do you have any insight to the worker situation, how they feel? Are they upset that they have to stay open, or is this just not a big deal?
I think it's mixed. I work really closely with the skilled labor, not so much at the packing plant, but at the feed yards and dairies. It's mixed. These people are concerned. There's a certain amount of fear. There's a little bit of a language barrier. So some of the translations, when you go from taking the CDC information and translating it into Spanish or Quiche or the different languages that our workers speak or comprehend, there's fear in that, right? Because it's just not as clear as when it was originally spoke. There's just a lot of confusion from that standpoint. And then if somebody who they trust, like myself, a lot of times I've been telling them just in very plain language of, hey, if you do these things, you'll be safe. You've got to watch out for your family. Let's just be smart and move forward. The main thing with the workers in agriculture is they have a deep responsibility for the animals that we take care of every day.
Mm-hmm.
And so they absolutely want to be at work. They're skilled, they're comfortable with what they do every day. For the large majority of our employees, they're outside. They're spread out. Social distancing is pretty natural in our line of work. When you talk about a pen rider at a feed yard, he's up on a horse riding through pens by himself. He may not come within 6 feet of another human all day long because his job is to check on all the cattle. And so those kind of things, when you talk about quarantining or shutting down employee movement at a feed yard or a dairy, it's just not that difficult to accomplish safe, logical continuation of working because for the most part, our employees are outside and socially distanced anyways.
Okay. When you go to these farms and feedlots and that, you're dealing with the labor, right? And do they look at you as like someone that is supposed to be educating them?
Absolutely. I work very closely with the people who are on the front lines, who have their boots on the ground. So the main part of my job when I step foot on a feed yard or a dairy is to find those people and figure out what their challenges are. A lot of times, the challenges that I'm seeing or solving absolutely have to do with animal health. Many times I come up on a challenge that keeps an employee from focusing on the animals at work, and then I try to solve that problem as well. So you can imagine if someone's having trouble with their vehicle is not reliable. They can't get to work. They're frustrated. They work long hours and they work 6 days a week. They're just like, man, I don't have a reliable vehicle. Sometimes I'll call the manager and say, hey, can you help so-and-so out? They're really struggling. They're trying to make ends meet and they don't have a reliable vehicle to get to work. And maybe that looks like carpooling, or it looks like, hey, I'll buy you new tires, to get you through until your paycheck or whatever. But a lot of times if we bring those challenges to light to the managers or the owners of these farms, they immediately can fix a lot of other problems on the farm because then that employee is set up for success. They're set up to focus more on their job because they're not worried about something at home or something like a vehicle getting to work. And so that sometimes feels like I'm not staying focused and I'm not staying like in my lane, my veterinary medicine lane. But I think we accomplish a lot of our goals on animal health if we pay attention to the big picture and we see the troubles that some of these workers are going through, fix those things, and then our problems with animal health kind of go away as well because they're doing their job correctly then.
Gotcha. I don't know. There is this thought out there, right? You said corporate feedlot and these monstrous slaughterhouses that they could care less about their workers, right? They're minorities, they're people of color, so they're expendable. We've heard a lot of that when it comes to, the force open of these plants. What you're telling me there, it's kind of a different story.
Oh, it couldn't be further from the truth, Rob. And I hope you and your listeners walk away with that feeling and that shared opinion because these large farms, these large dairies, large feed yards out where I'm at, they understand very deeply that labor is our biggest investment and it's our biggest challenge. And we require skilled labor and a lot of it. So we absolutely respect that we are going to be working with people with a different cultural background than us. And we are going to have to adjust to that and meet them in the middle. The owners of the farms and the people who manage the farms deeply, deeply understand that the safety of our employees, the well-being of our employees leads to a more productive and more profitable business venture. And that's probably true for a lot of industries, right? I don't think there's a lot of industries who could treat their employees poorly and get by with it for very long. And so it's just not been my experience, nor would I tolerate anybody trying to say that about any of the farms that I work at. We're trying to strike a balance. We've got to keep our people safe. We've got to keep our animals safe. we got to keep the food supply going. And so we're trying to strike that very logical and safe balance to keep people at work and keep things rolling.
Okay. And I'm glad you said that because, I mean, that's what I think, but, I don't see it like you do. I do know, like on a farm, when you have a new employee, the time it takes to train somebody, that's a valuable asset. Once you get somebody that's trained, you just don't want to give up. So it's good to hear firsthand.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's a huge expense in any business is that training period. As people are becoming more distanced from growing up on a traditional farm, we don't have the skilled labor that you could reach to and say, oh, yeah, I grew up on my dad's farm. I know how to do this. I know how to find sickness in cattle. Well, we're having to train people who have literally never stepped foot on a farm before. There's a lot of, different levels of skill when they come to work for us. So you're exactly right. There's a lot of investment in time and energy and expertise. We have a lot of nutritionists and veterinarians and consultants that come in and spend a lot of time to make these people experts so that we can have an efficient farm, an efficient food supply for America.
All right. You said you had 2 kids, right?
Yes, I have a 3-year-old named Archie and a almost 2-year-old named Jolie. And right now they are kicking my butt, I'll be honest.
Are they worse than the cows?
Some days I would argue, no, they're they're the light of my life. They're the best part of my days. But man, in the occupation that I have, toddlers can just be really challenging. And sometimes cows are just a lot more predictable than toddlers.
Yeah. Tera, I've been there. I've been where you are. My wife and our kids are older, right? And I will tell you this from the bottom of my heart. It doesn't get any better.
Oh, great.
No, not even close. It gets worse.
Going a different direction.
It gets worse every damn year. I mean, you think now is hell? Believe me, the little thermostat on Hades just keep turning up. And my oldest is 21 or 22. It doesn't matter. It's still, never quits. It gets worse and worse and worse. So at this point, I don't know what I would do if I were you.
At least you can strap them into a car seat at this age, right? And I know they can't go too far. They're not driving off or anything like that.
I know. When they get older, you have to use duct tape and zip ties.
Then I think the cops start sniffing around.
That's fine. All right. You and your husband, I know it's early, right? But, in the back of your head, are you kind of hoping one of them takes up the old veterinarian stethoscope?
I don't know. I can already tell my son is a very interesting boy. He studies things. And my husband always jokes with me that, I hope he got some athletic ability from him and I hope he gets his smarts from me. And he's a pretty sharp kid. The baby's too young to tell, but I don't know if he'll become a veterinarian. He might be grossed out by what I do. I kind of have a gross job in general, but maybe he'll become a doctor and get paid like 3 times more than I do and invite me to his yacht. That might be the route we try to push him down. But he can't become a human doctor and go to K-State, so we've got to keep him as a wildcat.
I mean, what is the deal with K-State? Why are you guys so fanatical?
I grew up in a family of wildcats. My parents met at
believe me,
K-State.
I'm well aware. I am so well aware that you grew up in a family of wildcats. It was pounded down our throats for 2 years in an ag leadership program. Wildcats,
Good.
wildcats,
I'm glad
wildcats.
My sister did them proud. I'm glad she did them proud. She wore her purple, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah. Well, seriously, when your kids grow up and they say, hey, I want to go to, I don't know, Vanderbilt, what are you going to say?
I hope they have their own savings account for that because I don't think Mama planned on that. That's one thing I've been super fortunate in my life is my family told me at a really young age I could be anything I wanted to be, and they truly meant that. And that's a pretty big gift to give someone. And it's a good challenge that I've set for myself because I'm exactly where I want to be and I'm doing exactly what I wanted to do. And so I can't think of a better way to pay them homage than to keep kicking butt.
Awesome. All right, Tera, it's been really interesting hearing what, the firsthand accounts, because honestly, that's where you learn stuff. But do you have kind of a final thought for us?
I'd like agriculturalists, and even if there's some consumers listening today, just to know that from the trenches, we're doing our darndest to get the train back on the track, right? We are going to keep animal welfare and animal well-being at the very front of our minds every day. And when you see beef missing at the grocery store, when you see dairy not on the shelves at the grocery store, know that there's a whole lot of Americans just waking up every day trying to make that problem go away. And it will. We aren't crumbling. We're going to come out strong. We're going to come out on the other side better. And we're going to have more safety factors in place, right? We're going to have ways to prevent and handle this in the future better. And what seems really unprecedented at an early stage in my career, I hope someday I have gray hair and I can advise a veterinarian in my shoes and say, when I was 30 something, this is what we were faced with and this is how we overcame it. And I'm excited for that period of time. It's not here yet. I'm really excited and looking forward to it. And I just encourage people, if you can buy dairy, if you can afford beef right now, if you can turn on your grill, get some meat going, make some homemade ice cream, celebrate with your family, properly social distance as your state recommends. But do those things because we're out here trying to put it on your table, and we'll get back to it. We'll get back to where there's no disruption in the production line, but we need some grace and we need some patience and we need people to understand that we're doing a darn good job. If you have questions about where your food comes from, nobody has those questions right now because they just want food. If you have questions about where your food comes from or how it's produced, ask someone in the ag industry. That's what we fight for every day, and I want consumers to challenge us and find out. But, man, ask somebody who knows what they're doing because it gets really old hearing from Hollywood and Washington, D.C. how we should all be doing our jobs, right?
Amen. Yeah. Out of everything that's happening, once it goes back, yes, I'm probably the majority of people will float back into their old habits. If they were really worried about organic, they'll go back to being worried about organic when things get comfortable, that type of mindset. But I do think there is a certain amount of people, a certain percentage that are going to change. They have now had to look at where their food comes from. They've now had to come to the realization that, hey, every time I go to the grocery store, those shelves aren't necessarily going to be full. So out of all the bad stuff that's happened with us, and there's been a lot, and a lot of it has come down on ag, out of all the bad stuff, hopefully at least some mindsets will change about, yes, I'm very happy that we have a safe, affordable food supply.
I hope so, too. I have a really good mentor in the veterinary profession that he always has told me that man with a full stomach has many problems, and man with an empty stomach has one. He needs to eat. And I remind myself of that every day because we are in the trenches and we are feeding the world, and that's a noble profession to be a part of, and I don't take that responsibility lightly. And the people that I work with every day and the people who have their skin in the game, there's some pretty neat Americans, and they could use your support in the coming months, when people have normal paychecks again and when people can afford to do so, to tip your hats to these farmers and ranchers because they sure dug their heels in and did what it took to keep food on your table.
Absolutely. Well, Tera Barnhardt from out there in Kansas, thank you for taking the time to talk. I know you're busy, and it's probably more now than ever, and especially with those two little rugrats that you have, right? But thank you. Thank you for taking the time. I really, really do appreciate it.
Absolutely. It was a pleasure, and I'm excited to listen to more of your podcasts. They're always entertaining.
Do you want to know something, Tera? I got a message from your sister. She's like, hey,
oh no,
when she's on, can you send me a link? And my response was, what the hell are you doing not listening to every episode?
She told me to get on. She goes, you got to listen to this guy because then you'll go on his podcast, I promise. So, yeah, you've done a wonderful job. I appreciate you're kind of like the crusader for the ag industry on air. So that is a really neat project that you've got going on because I know it's not the only thing you're doing. You're probably knee deep in planting right now as well. So
yeah, that's secondary. But thank you for saying that. And maybe someday I will work hard enough and make a big enough difference that maybe your sister Julie might actually download a damn podcast.
We'll have to get her on that. To be fair, I don't know that she's a podcast listener in general, so it's not like she's filling her free time with
don't stick up for her.
Competing podcasts.
No, don't try to smooth it over.
I've got to. She's my big sister. I got to stick up for her.
Well, Tera, thank you so very much. And everybody else, we hope you catch us next time.
And thank you for listening to the Shark Farmer Podcast. I am your host, Rob Sharkey. Please visit us at www.sharkyfarms.com. And just search for Shark Farmer to follow me on Twitter. Later.